Welcome to Life Talk. I'm Mark Crutcher, president of Life Dynamics. I'm joined by my usual suspect. Hello, Destiny Herndon-DelaRosa. How are you? And my able assistant at Life Dynamics, Renee Hobbs. Hello, Renee.
Hello.
We got a lot of stuff. Now, let's get started. In my book, Siege, which we're going to talk about later in the show, I talk about how the abortion industry is openly trying to remove the stigma from abortion because they know that this is their biggest problem that they have never overcome. And they believed, as I document in the book, they believed early on that the legalization of abortion would naturally take the stigma away from it, and it's never happened. And they're taking two tacks now. Some of them are openly trying to take the stigma away using various methods that we know about. There's an article recently that Pro-Abort's produced called Celebrating the Moral Courage of Women Who Have Abortions. Do y'all know where the moral courage is in killing your child for your own benefit?
Well, I think most women know that there is no moral courage, that it really kind of is an act of cowardice. It's that thing where you have a problem, you need the problem to go away, and so rather than you necessarily sacrificing, you are offering up the life of your child as a sacrifice. And at the bare bones, that's what most women have to acknowledge, which is why you can never take the stigma away, because it is a biological stigma where you are doing something inherently against your own body and your physiology that is meant to protect a child. And so we can have campaigns all day long like Shout Your Abortion, but they will always backfire, because just as many women as you have saying, oh yeah, it was the best thing I ever did, you're going to have those women saying it was devastating, I was suicidal afterwards. This is the true effect of abortion on women and how not empowering it actually is. So keep up trying to destigmatize it with these campaigns, because I actually think it probably leads to a lot of women getting the help that they ultimately need to heal from abortions. Because if you're going to ask me to shout the biggest regret of my life, it's not going to be pretty.
All right. Well, Renee, you and I talk to these women all the time, post-aborted women that call here wanting legal help or medical help or whatever it might be. And, I've always believed that the women who call here, and we've had both kinds. You and I have both talked to women who are just devastated, who are near collapse over their abortion. Mm-hmm. And we've had others, and you and I both have had to kind of bite our tongue a few times in anger at some of these women who call in and say, oh yeah, I knew it was a baby, and I've had 4 abortions, and if I got pregnant again today, I'd have another one right now.
Right. They just want the money from a lawsuit.
Right. They're just trying to get us to help them get some. And we've had them actually say that.
Right.
Say I'm just going to see if I can get some money because I was injured.
Right.
I've always believed that the women who were the most mentally healthy are the ones who have the regrets. The ones who don't have the regrets are the ones who are screwed up. And we see that in talking with them all the time.
Right.
I think that's why you see that this is such an emotionally heated conversation. And what I like to remind people, whether it's in an online forum or something else, when you're talking to a woman and she is screaming at you and she is so vile and emotional, you aren't that emotional if there's not some sort of hurt or fear or pain that's behind that. And we need to remember that actually speaks to her humanity. Because like you said, those are the people who are well-adjusted, are the ones who they do feel some sort of remorse.
They
the
know
ones
what they
who
do.
Don't are psychopaths.
Yeah,
you
that's
can't
right.
really get that far with them. But just even when they're yelling at you or spitting in your face on the sidewalk or whatever, just acknowledge this is because they are hurting so deeply, and there's so much of a need to help these women.
Right. But from the pro-life standpoint, the good news is they're never going to take this stigma away.
Never.
It will never go away. And this is something that I reinforce in Siege over and over again. We need to count on that. That's our biggest asset, and we need to push that envelope. And we need to continue to do that and continue to stigmatize abortion. Not only abortion, but the people who do them, because they are stigmatized people and they deserve to be stigmatized.
Right. Yeah, they tried with the T-shirts. They keep pushing new and different things.
I had an abortion T-shirt.
Right.
They thought they were going to get all these women all over the country to wear those stupid T-shirts.
Right.
And my feeling is they're probably being used to polish cars with now. They got they got a warehouse full of old T-shirts they can't get rid of. But again, if they think they're ever going to take the stigma off of it, they're just whistling past the graveyard. It's never going to happen. I've often said, and y'all have heard me say here many times, that being pro-choice is a sickness. It's a mental disease. An article in Yahoo, this woman writes that, because there's so many people now talking about how obscene it is, that babies are aborted because they have Down syndrome. And she had a baby with Down syndrome, and this shows how unhinged these people are. Now, first off, she wouldn't use her name in here. So what does that tell you, right?
Yeah.
You're talking about the stigma. If she was so proud of what she did,
Right,
why wouldn't she use her
She's
name?
being a coward.
All right. And here's another one that was published on Yahoo. It says, if I knew my daughter had Down syndrome, I would have aborted her. But in the article, she talks about Joanna, the nickname is JoJo for the little girl. She says, quote, she's the center of my world and she's doing great. But then she turns right around and said, but if I had known she had Down syndrome, I would have aborted her.
The thing that always gets me about these Down syndrome cases is it's 90% of children with Down syndrome are aborted. But tell me a child, show me a child that is happier than a child with Down syndrome. And I work in the special needs ministry at my church, and just these kids, it's what we all want for our children, right? Which is a kid who just is happy and sees the beauty and joy in everything and just has this energy and joyfulness.
Right.
And you cannot find a child that is more joyful. And in part, it's because they are oblivious to a lot of you know, the evils of the world. And so tell me that those are not the most happy children, and that's all any parent wants for their kid. And these children with Down syndrome absolutely have that, and the fact that 90% of people miss out on that, and 90% of these children miss out on getting to live a completely happy life.
Mm-hmm.
But here's the deal. I've always said that everything you're saying is right. We do not, we try to sell abortion as compassionate for these children.
It's convenient.
It's for us.
Yeah.
We don't, it's like we're going to kill you for your own good, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to make things better for you. And so we're going to kill you. We do not, that's a bald-faced lie. We do it for us.
Yep. Selfishness, yes.
It's pure 100% selfishness.
Right.
And in this article, this woman who has this child, whose 7-year-old daughter has Down syndrome, who she describes as the center of my world, quote, and she's doing great. She says, when she says, I would have had an abortion had I known, she says, I never signed up for this.
Then
Not
somebody
she
needs
never
to take the baby away from her, the 7-year-old away from her. She has no business raising that child.
She's not a mother.
Right.
I don't care what she thinks about herself. But you've got 3 teenagers at home every day, and you talk to me about the things that go on.
Right.
Right. Mm-hmm. Every day, things happen in your family that you didn't sign up for.
That's right.
Right. Because you got 3 teenagers.
Right.
Right. At the same time.
At the same time.
You didn't sign up for that.
Right.
But you're a mom.
That's right.
And
I'm there to take care of them and help them through these hard times right now.
Right.
That's my job.
Right. But this is the definitive statement about 97% of people who abort their child because the child has Down syndrome. I didn't sign up for this. I didn't sign up for it.
Yeah, very selfish.
It's unbelievable.
Right.
We've got another situation in Alabama we've talked about before, and this goes to our Child Predator Project. Planned Parenthood failed to report the rape of a 14-year-old girl who had 2 abortions in 4 months. The perp kept taking her back. And he went the second time, I guarantee you, because he knew he got away with it the first time.
Yeah, that's right.
And this is what's happening all over the country.
Yep.
Abortion is a rapist's best friend, and I think this is the #1 argument in our movement, that we need to reframe the narrative, because we're constantly told abortion needs to stay legal because of cases of rape and incest. Abortion needs to be illegal because of cases of rape and incest.
Right.
And that's what nobody realizes is when we're talking about cases of rape and incest, it's 0.06% is at most 1% of these cases. But how many more are there that we never find out about because the rapist was actually able to take the child that he was abusing straight to an abortion clinic to cover up the evidence?
And if you go to our childpredator.com,
report.
childpredator.com website, you see that clearly, and we put all those real cases that you and I wrote the article up on, and showing how these guys know they can take these girls back and back and back. And one guy,
Several times.
One guy in in Florida had 9. He took his victim back 9 times.
Right.
She had 9 abortions in 8 years, so she was having more than 1 a year. 9 abortions in 8 years. Yeah. And finally, they never reported it. None of the abortion clinics ever reported it. Finally, she told one of her friends, and the friend that she told, her father happened to be an FBI agent.
Right.
And the little friend went and told her father, and the father said, whoa, we're going to deal with this. And the guys wound up going to the state penitentiary, and he'll never get out.
No, he
I
won't.
don't know if y'all remember the story. It was a year or two ago. The man who was found with the 3 girls that he had kidnapped in his house.
Right.
And he had them for years. And one of them actually had, I think it was 5 forced abortions.
Right.
And it might have even just been him like beating her up every time she became pregnant. But either way, she had miscarried or, you know, had these forced abortions 5 different times. And so afterwards, she got tattoos to represent each one of them.
Right.
And People magazine actually covered this story, which was kind of shocking because it shined a light on the fact that, again, abortion is a rapist's best friend.
Absolutely. You know, we're in the political season, which seems to never end in America. But anyway, you know, we have all these Republicans talking about how pro-life they are. And you never really know. I mean, we've been deceived so many times. As I've often said, we've been stabbed in the back more often by Republicans than we've been stabbed in the chest by Democrats. And you never really know. Some of these guys, and Carly Fiorina as well, have been making pretty forceful statements. John Kasich from Ohio comes out on television on CNN and tells host Dana Bash on State of the Union that conservatives, quote, focus too much on abortion. So we know he's not pro-life. His commitment to the pro-life cause is strictly political. That's all it is. So we can know for sure that he's not pro-life.
Disappointing.
Huh?
So that's disappointing.
Well, that really is not that big a shock.
I just feel like society in general focuses too much on murder. If we would just kind of let murderers take care of themselves, it wouldn't be that big a deal.
Right. Finally, National Catholic Reporter magazine or newspaper, whatever, publishes an article, and we've talked here many times about how the church is responsible for this thing because this Holocaust because they refused to get involved in opposition to it. They published an article saying the Catholic Church should partner with Planned Parenthood to reduce the need for abortions.
Sadly, I mean, I would say a lot of churches already are partnering with
They already are.
whether they
know that
realize
they
it
are.
or not, because there's a huge void there.
Right.
And when there is that void, Planned Parenthood can enter the picture, like we saw with them sending out the pastoral letter or whatever.
Right.
Here's how to talk to your parishioners and you know,
Yep.
your congregation about abortion.
Yep.
So their silence is permission that
Yep.
they're granting.
Well, let's take a break for the Ask Mark segment.
I'm Renee Hobbs, and this is Ask Mark. You often hear pro-lifers referred to as anti-choice extremists who are just trying to control what other people believe. How do we respond to that?
Well, if choice is defined as the right to butcher defenseless children by the millions, then we are indeed anti-choice. If that also makes us extremists, so be it. However, to contend that we're trying to tell people what they should believe is absurd. Laws are passed to control behavior, not thought. That is what Martin Luther King meant when he stated that the law could not make people love him, but it could keep people from lynching him. In the case of abortion, the pro-life movement could not care less what people think or believe about the unborn, as long as they're not allowed to kill them.
Thank you, Mark. If you have a question for Mark or an issue you would like to see addressed, you can contact me by calling the office or through email, Facebook, or Twitter.
Welcome back. All right, we talked a little bit earlier about them trying to remove the stigma. I meant to bring this up and I forgot to. Kimberly Guilfoyle was on the Fox News show The Five. She's one of the hosts on there, and they were talking about these videos on the baby parts marketing, and it got kind of heated, but it was pretty neat. One of the things she said when Greg Gutfeld introduced the issue, and then some pro-aborts tried to defend Planned Parenthood and all. And she says, quote, she hollered, quote, "You're a butcher, you're a murderer. You have no heart and hell is waiting for you."
Wow.
Good for her.
Let's don't mince words here.
That's right.
I want to talk for a minute, and we're real quickly about something, and then we're going to talk about the Siege book. On this baby parts thing that David DeLayden did and released all these videos, and it's been the hottest thing in the pro-life movement now for a few months. Obviously, we've talked here before about it, and he's admitted it in lots of things that he's talked about. He's been very honest that it actually was a continuation of a project that we started back in 2000. We were the first ones to do the investigation of the marketing of baby parts. And there's a lot of information that's coming out right now. Boston Hospital, for example, Boston Children's Hospital, has been using the brains of aborted babies in research for years. And a spokesman for the hospital, when they were contacted about it, said, quote, "It's purely a scientific issue, not a moral one." If you can remove in your mind the issue of we're going to use the brains of these babies from morality of how they were killed, you are screwed up. I don't care what anybody says. And you know, this reinforces, and we've seen some other examples of this where hospitals now have been found out to be using this material, and pharmaceutical companies, and they always take this point, oh, this is about science, this is not about morality. What if a scientist kills his wife, murders her, poisons her, and he says, wait a minute, this was about science, this wasn't about morality. I used science to kill her, so therefore it's off the table from the moral argument. We said, this guy's nuts. Well, these people are just as crazy. And I'm going to tell you something, I've said this a million times. There is no force on earth more dangerous than science isolated from morality. If you isolate science from morality, what you have are Nazis. That's what they did. You know, and you could have interviewed Joseph Mengele if he was still alive, or you could have interviewed him when he was on the run after the collapse of Nazi Germany. And he would have said that same thing. Yeah, when I was doing those experiments on those little kids at Auschwitz, and doing these horrible things to these little children, it was about science. It wasn't about morality. We're just trying to, it's a scientific inquiry. And speaking of Mengele, I've talked about this in the past. Y'all know what Mengele did when he was on the run. When Nazi Germany collapsed.
He became an abortionist.
He was an abortionist. And he was in Central America. I think he lived in Colombia, and he lived in Chile. I think Chile's where he died. But that's how he earned his living while he was there as an abortionist. Unbelievable.
Because it makes complete sense. I think when you can take a human being and remove the humanity, which is ultimately what they're trying to do, you know, these are human body parts, but it's not a human being we're killing.
Right.
Like, what?
All right, I want to get to that. That's the point I want to get to. When we did our initial investigation, and we outed a couple of organizations that were involved in this. One of them was called the Anatomic Gift Foundation, and it was run by some people named Bardsley. The Bardsleys had previously been involved with an organization called the International Institute for the Advancement of Medicine, or IIAM, and they still exist. They're still out there. The IIAM board had decided that the baby parts thing was too politically dangerous, and so they decided to get out of the baby parts deal. And that's when the Bardsleys left IIAM and founded the AGF, or Anatomic Gift Foundation, which is one of the organizations that we outed in the baby parts thing. But what they did was they used the protocol that was set up by IIAM, which they helped to set up, for the procurement of these parts. And we were able to get a copy of the procurement protocol. And matter of fact, you can read it on our website.
Is this like the order form?
No, this is not the orders. This is how you go about getting the parts.
Okay.
How do you dissect it? So when you need eyes, it tells you how do you pluck the eyes out.
And they
of
were
them.
working exclusively with unborn babies.
Right.
So
right.
it wouldn't be any other.
Well, no. This is just talking about how you get them out of fetal cadavers, corpses of babies they've been killed in abortion, and they talk about how if you need a leg, be sure you cut the hip joint this way, and so you get a whole hip joint with the leg intact. If you need eyes, this is how you pluck them out. And then they also have a thing called media, which is there are several different kinds. There's RPMI and there's DMEN. These are liquids that you put the parts on to preserve them, so that when you ship them by FedEx or UPS or how you ship them to the end user, they stay fresh. If you just put them in a box and ship them, they're gonna go bad. So you put them on DMEN, which is the stuff you want them to float in, and then you put it in dry ice and you ship it. I'm going to take just one of them, and this is pretty rough, but we're talking about the Boston Children's Hospital using brains, right? Okay, you think, oh, they just get a brain there. Okay, well, how do they get the brain there? Let's look at how that actually takes place. And you got all these pro-aborts out here on some of these shows that are talking about this, saying, well, they're not babies. These are just tissue. This is just tissue. These are just biological material and so forth. I want to read you. They're looking for what's called the pituitary gland, And that's at the base of the brain inside the skull. And that's one of the biggest that's one of the bigger demanded parts in the fetal tissue research. And IIAM is telling the people that work at the clinics how you get that material so that it can best be used. You don't want to destroy it or do something to it that'll cause it not to be used. So you're getting this pituitary gland, and here they call it a pit. So when I say pit, that's what they mean. Gestation, 20 to 24 weeks. So these are babies that, in some cases, we know are viable babies, right? That the pro-aborts say this never happens, right? And they had a diagram there. I'm quoting now. The most difficult to obtain tissue because of its small size and fragility. Great care must be taken when examining the base of the skull. Oftentimes, presence of pituitary is a function of how the head is detached from the body of the fetus during the abortion and how badly the head is crushed. If head remains attached to the body, pituitary will likely be present. Also, pit can remain even if the head is crushed if the base of the skull is intact where the optic nerves enter the brain. Pit is positioned directly in center of a small cavity created by the two bony structures as shown. Because the gland is being used to obtain luteinizing hormone, LH, it is necessary to determine the sex of the fetus whenever possible. Therefore, as many remains as necessary should be retained to accomplish this task. Do not remove the pit from the skull. Instead, put as much of the head as will fit in a urine cup and fill to the top with RPMI media. Make sure skull is cracked open or split to allow cold media to contact gland. If you must trim the skull to fit in the specimen container, do so by removing the crown. The presence of other tissues such as brain is not necessary but may help maintain integrity of pit cavity. This is not a human being they're dealing with. They're telling you how to crack open the skull of this baby so that you can preserve the parts that you're going to experiment on. Don't tell me these are not babies. Don't read this. I challenge any of these people, and I think this, I mentioned a moment ago what Kimberly Guilfoyle said, you're a butcher, you're a murderer, you have no heart and hell will be waiting for you. And I doubt she's even seen this.
I feel like that's absolutely horrifying. And if you were to read that exact same thing about puppy dogs, you know, people would be outraged, but for some reason, human children,
it doesn't matter.
This is fine as long as it's for science. It's absolutely horrifying.
But this is their own words.
Yeah.
This is them saying, okay, when I say to you, I want to buy pituitary gland, here's how I want you to take care of it. So you chop the head off the body and put it in a urine cup. And if you have to crack the skull open to get the media to soak the gland, then make sure you take the crown of the head off and crack the skull open to let the stuff in.
You have to be a monster just to do abortions, but to
I
do
was just
that.
fixing to say, that's the word that comes to mind. You are a monster when you are doing this. And I don't care whether you're the monster at the abortion clinic or you're the monster at the research place that's getting this box in the mail. UPS delivers you a box, you open it up, there's a urine cup with a baby's head in it. Floating in this RPMI media, and you're not a monster. You can sit there and work on that and say, what this guy says, it's purely scientific issue. It's not a moral one. You are a monster if you can take that position and do this. And these are the people, by the way, that are receiving, the person that made this statement is the one that's getting this urine cup with a baby's head floating in it, with the skull cracked open.
Well, it reminds me in the CMP videos when Holly O'Donnell talks about how they said it's commonplace for the people procuring organs to just pass out because it really, you never kind of get used to it. And you talk about that in your book, Siege, the difference between the talkers and the doers, the people who actually have to handle these children.
Well, let's talk about Siege. I want to bring up, in the time that we have left, I do have this new book out called Siege, and you can get it on our websites, any one of our websites, or you can call our office, 940-380-8800, and order it. Obviously, you helped me write it, and so you've read it, and you finished reading it yesterday.
It's an excellent book.
And I think we bring up a bunch of things in this book that people aren't aware of and maybe hadn't thought about. I know you brought up some things this morning when we were talking about it that you hadn't thought about, or that it cleared up some things that you had some misconceptions about in the past. But in the time we got left, I want to introduce something that everybody at this particular point needs to be made aware of. and we won't go into all the details like I do in the book. With all the things that's happening right now with this baby parts thing and all the other stuff that's happening against Planned Parenthood, we need to be very hyper vigilant about something that I think is a very distinct possibility. We know for a long time that Planned Parenthood has tried to become the nation's abortionist. They've been trying to get rid of all the what they call independents, the non-Planned Parenthood abortion clinics. And there's been this kind of internecine fight within the abortion industry between these independent clinics and Planned Parenthood. They hate each other's guts because these independent clinics know that Planned Parenthood's trying to put them out of business, and they're trying to posit themselves as intellectually superior, and they do better work, and their standards are higher and all this. And Planned Parenthood always tries to promote this because they're trying to take over the abortion business. But I am convinced something far beyond that is going on here. I am convinced, and I think I make a pretty plausible case for it in Siege, that Planned Parenthood's ultimate goal is to become an agency of the United States government. And I think the evidence that I put in Siege makes that pretty clear. And especially when you look at this building program that they went on toward the end of the Bush administration, building these super centers like the one down in Houston.
They're popping up all over, yeah.
Yeah, and they're not just little centers. These are gigantic centers.
Right.
I think that, I think I make the case pretty strong in Siege for why that is an indicator or evidence of their ultimate goal is to become an agency of the United States government. I think we could look up here one day and see a press conference being called in which the President of the United States, whoever that is at that time, announces that Planned Parenthood has been brought into the United States government under the Department of Health and Human Services, and we now have Planned Parenthood actually dropping the name, and it'll be called something like the U.S. Department of Reproductive Health and Women's Health, or something like that, U.S. Department of Reproduction and Women's Health, something like that. This is a very, very dangerous situation, and it's particularly dangerous right now. We have seen, and I don't know what the mechanism would be for this, the legal mechanism, whether they can do it through executive fiat, the president can just say, oh, this is a new agency of the government, or if it has to go through Congress. I don't know what the mechanism is. But what I do know is that whatever that mechanism is, if you have someone, Barack Obama has proven, if you want to get something done, just do it, right? He's circumvented the system hundreds of times already and just done things by executive order that there was no way he could get through Congress, and he knew he couldn't get them through Congress, and he actually admits that, yeah, I had to take that course of action because of this, right? Because I couldn't get it through Congress, so I just did it by executive order. As Planned Parenthood is beginning to, their ship is taking on water right now, obviously. As this gets worse and worse, as we get closer to the next year's elections, I think that if Barack Obama looks up here one day and says, you know, I think the Republicans might win this deal. Or a Democrat might win who's not committed to Planned Parenthood as much as I am. I'm going to go ahead and do it right now and take it off the table. I think there's also a possibility, let's just say it's Hillary Clinton, and she's ahead and it looks like she's going to win. I think Obama would sit down with her and say, I need to know right now, are you committed to bringing Planned Parenthood into the government or not? And if you're not, I'm going to do it right now. Or if you think it'd be politically better for you, for me to do it right now, I'll do it now. And I think we need to be hyper vigilant at this, because this could be a very dangerous situation for us.
Yes, it could.
It's a completely symbiotic relationship because, as you point out in Siege, they've reached their, I don't remember what you call it, the market top, and so they haven't been able to have the standard inflation that other medical procedures have because people won't pay a certain amount for abortion, so they have to go through some sort of government funding. And then you have a government that wants to get rid of the undesirables, you know, just like Margaret Sanger did. And so they want to create this giant abortion machine because it's much easier to subsidize a $500 to a $3,000 abortion than it would be to subsidize a human being for 18 years if they're on some sort of government assistance. So the two, I mean, Barack Obama and Cecile Richards have been bedfellows ever since the beginning. So it wouldn't shock me if he tried to push it through at the end of his administration.
Well, one of the things that we talk about in Siege is not only that they are bedfellows, as you say, and there's all these documents out there showing how many times Cecile Richards has visited the White House. She's on the White House log. I mean, she's a regular visitor there. She's the head of Planned Parenthood, and she walks in and sits down with the President of the United States. And plus, let's don't forget that when Obamacare was not, the registrations weren't going well, and they appointed all of these people to facilitate getting new people into the system. Planned Parenthood was one they appointed. Planned Parenthood was hiring people to go door to door to register people for Obamacare, because they recognized, and again, this is another thing I document in the Siege book, they recognized that Obamacare is basically a bailout package for the abortion industry. The abortion industry's got financial troubles that they cannot solve. They've never been able to solve them. They can't solve them. The only solution to them is government-funded abortions. And I think I make that case pretty airtight.
I think so many pro-lifers see these little red flags that make us uncomfortable, but we're not sure exactly how they go together. And in Siege, you really kind of illuminate the whole process and connect all of those dots. So I think the average pro-lifer obviously needs to have this book just to be equipped about what is going on, because there's a very, very real possibility that it will come to fruition in the next few years.
And this is not the only thing that we talk about. There's a lot of dangers out there. That the thing we talked about, the BGS, the Buffett Gates syndicate, and the money that they're pouring in. People have no idea that these people are putting billions, with a B, billions into the abortion industry. And we show how that's being done. We are winning this battle, but if we don't address these issues, these are the sort of things, these are Hail Mary passes that could come in the fourth quarter of this game and just wipe us out. We need to be aware of them, and once you're aware of them, once you're warned about them, then they become easier to deal with. And so, that I really want to encourage, not just because I wrote it, but there's things in there that we get to see. Renee, I talked to you about this when you first came to work here almost 5 years ago. We see things here at Life Dynamics that even other pro-life groups don't see, because of the relationship that we often have with people who actually work in the abortion industry. And you get a view of this. I mean, I told you when you first came to work here that 90 days or 6 months down the road, you're going to have a totally different view of the battle over abortion than what you have today. Did I not tell you that?
Yes, you did.
Did that happen?
Yes, it did.
And does it continue to happen?
Yes.
And so we have an obligation at Life Dynamics. If we have information that the abortion industry, that the pro-life movement needs to know about the abortion industry, we have an obligation to get that out there. And that's what we're trying to do with this book. And this issue of Planned Parenthood becoming an agency of the U.S. government, I think, is a very real possibility. And if you look at all the things that we talk about in Siege that are evidence for that, I think it's a pretty compelling case. And I would argue that if you look at the evidence that I put out there, I don't think you can give me an alternative explanation other than that they want to become an agency of the government. I don't think there is one. And you're going to look up here and see Cecile Richards being a cabinet member in either the Obama administration, or if it doesn't happen by then in the Clinton administration, if she happens to, God forbid, if she happens to win. And because I think she'd be just as dedicated to this as he would be.
For sure.
I think politically, his attitude's going to be to her, look, I'm done. I can't run for anything else. And this is going to be a political hot potato, so let me do it during my term. And then when you come in, your attitude will be, well, it's already done. I didn't have anything to do with that. And then even though you know it's going to happen and you do support it. So I think that over the next year or so, we could see this happen. And I'm telling you right now, I would not be one bit surprised to see a news conference called today with Obama standing there and Cecile Richards standing beside him, and him with a big plaque in the front announcing the U.S. Department of Reproductive and Women's Health and Planned Parenthood is being brought into the government, and all their people are being brought in. They never have to worry about money again. It's part of the appropriations process in Congress. They're going to be in the schools at a much higher level, because it's going to be very difficult if Planned Parenthood and this U.S. Department of Reproductive and Women's Health, if they're part of the government, it's going to be impossible to keep them out of the schools. Impossible. There's no way. So this is a dangerous situation, one I think we need to be aware of. Anyway, thank you guys. I appreciate it. And it's our first show under our new format, and I think it went real well, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Until next time, remember, Life Dynamics is not here to put up a good fight. We're here to win, because winning is how the killing stops. We'll see you on the next edition of Life Talk.